Are we going to eradicate theft? Probably not in my lifetime. Is shoplifting and shop theft like whack-a-mole? When you detain one and somebody else replaces them? The answer to that is probably yes. But again, keep in line, when we talk about risk, we're not just talking about loss prevention and fraud and theft.
Corin, you've advised retailers around the world on risk. If you had 5 minutes with every retail CEO today, what's one threat that you'll tell them they should be preparing for right now?
I think when talking to CEOs now, the biggest threat to retail is profitability. Whether it be margin, whether it be sales, that is the biggest risk. Retailers are in the business to retail. Now, if we're talking specifically in terms of retail risk, in terms of loss prevention or other topics, clearly there is a step change in the market at the moment, certainly on what we call the high street, the strip mall. So safety, workplace safety, staff safety, violence is becoming a huge topic. It's not necessarily about the loss of product. It's about the safety of our employees when they come to work. So there is a huge investment going on from retailers towards that. But also CFOs and CEOs are looking for return on investment. They're looking for this return because the technology is out there. There is so much technology out there, so much data, so many systems that can do various things. However, the biggest challenge is, can I get a quick return, and does it facilitate profitability? So I would not turn a blind eye to the violence topic, because organized crime is becoming, again, more prevalent. But when you talk to retailers and say, what's your biggest risk? For example, in Europe, cyber is by far the biggest risk. We've seen 3 or 4 large-scale activities last year, which caused massive loss and profit loss to companies such as Marks and Spencer's and Co-op to spring to mind. So definitely that's something in the kind of rear view mirror that people are keeping an eye on. But I think definitely when it comes down to a single thing, it's about, can we retail? Can we make profit?
So, Corin, if we look at the retail risk world, right? There is internal theft, there is external theft, there is ORC, which is another subset altogether, right? Organized retail crime, and then there is supply chain related management theft or loss that happens, right? Among these categories, where are you seeing the most amount of return on investment from technology perspective when retailers are putting technology and fixing the problem? Which of these is being solved better than the others? If you could talk about that.
Yeah, it's probably around your product, and it's around your inventory visibility. For sure, if not knowing what you're losing is a massive risk. If you have no mechanism to understand, did I receive the product, what did I sell, and what am I left with, then clearly you could be doing very well and you could be doing very badly. So having visibility on your loss or your shrink is key. Definitely topics like RFID are still out there. RFID, in my opinion, has had quite a slow to medium adoption across retailers. Some retailers have adopted and embraced it from the get-go, and they saw an immediate return on investment because they knew what inventory they had. They knew about what product was missing. They could fulfill their on-shelf availability. They could replenish. So for sure, they could trade to their maximum ability, whereas retailers that didn't know and waited 12 months for a stock take and then realized there was a hole in their inventory, or quite frankly, those are lost sales opportunities. Those moments are probably gone, and you've got to now wait for the next trading year. So I think RFID and anything connected to where is my product, where at any stage when I want to check where is it, so that when a consumer asks for it, whether it be on e-commerce or whether it be in a store or B2B, you are able to fulfill that demand. Because otherwise, again, it comes back to that lost opportunity, lost profitability.
Right. And Corin, there are in the entire security space, right? If you break it down, you have loss prevention solutions, right, which sort of try to prevent the sales even before that happens. There are loss detection, solutions, and then there are loss analytics solutions, which sort of tell you, what's gone missing, where it did get missing, what time of the day did it go missing, and all of these, the one of the base layers is, of course, to make sure that you ensure on shelf availability of the product, right? So whatever is gone is gone. Just make sure that you restock it so that the customer can get their hands on it, right? So I see that theme across all these multiple types of products that exist or solutions that exist in the market. But what I still fail to understand is, among these solutions, where are you seeing the most return on investment from a retailer's perspective? Like, for example, are those pedestrian leaders that they are putting at the exits, is it more to do with visual visibility of those pedestrian readers, which is creating a deterrent, visual deterrent, or is it there is more to it? Like, where are you seeing the value from a retailer's perspective?
I mean, definitely anything that provides you with a data insight which you can react to is something that a retailer is interested in. I think what it raises is a really good point, though. There is so much technology out there giving you data insights. You have RFID, you have EAS, article detection, you have exception-based reporting at the point of sale. So what the challenge I see with a lot of retailers at the moment is they are overwhelmed with data. And actually, sometimes I have to question whether the solution provider, when they've sold this solution, which stands up by itself, it does exactly what it should do invariably. Do we ever inquire in terms of, do you have the resource to manage the data output?
Absolutely.
Do you have the resource to be able to react to that data insight, which may be in hours, days, or weeks? Because otherwise, that data is just lost. And again, you're into this kind of model of, it takes me 8 weeks to react to something which actually the system told me on day one, but I didn't realize until it had gained legs that it had actually grown to this size. And now I can't recover what I've lost. All I can do is try to fix what I can see. So I think, in terms of, to your point, understanding what's missing, and there is an element, to be honest with you, with retailers of having a risk appetite. We talk about catching bad guys a lot of the time. Now, some retailers wholeheartedly embrace the fact that they want to be seen by both their consumers, but also the bad guys, as not tolerating whatever behavior is eroding their margins. At the same time, there are other retailers, to your point, that say, listen, we know it's gone. We're never going to get it back. Even if we arrest somebody or detain somebody, that product is gone, and we're highly unlikely to get anything back. And in fact, investing further in trying to catch people is just, again, eroding our commercials. So to your point, better that it never happened, or we mitigate the risk. Now, maybe this isn't something that's widely said. And however, I think there is also, if you were to ask a retailer, would you rather stop the activity happening in your store, stop it happening overall, or do you care if you displace it? And quite frankly, the retailers that invest heavily in technologies are hoping that they can displace the activity to somewhere else. Now, that's focused invariably on external. But obviously, You've got internal risk. And I think when you look at loss, and let's call it subversive loss, theft, fraud, you've probably got a three-way split, depending on the retailer you are and the percentages of internal risk, external fraud, ORC, and then process. And the process can account for almost 50% of your loss. To your point, if you have an issue in your supply chain, if you don't have good visibility on what's coming in, and I've seen many retailers, this has happened where they suffer a big loss, everyone looks for the fraud or the theft, and then 6 months later, we do an inventory count in a DC and we find 5 pallets that are stuck behind something else.
Supply chain.
So I think, again, there is no silver bullet. There is no right or wrong answer, quite frankly, or if there is, the only wrong answer is to do absolutely nothing. But it is a layered approach, and I see the logic sometimes in why, but also if you actually go to the root cause, if you take theft has been around since time started. It's in the Bible. Are we going to eradicate theft? Probably not in my lifetime. Is shoplifting and shop theft like whack-a-mole? When you detain one and somebody else replaces them? The answer to that is probably yes. Could you target harden your environment to mean that it becomes less attractive to somebody to steal from you as opposed to your neighbor? Yes, clearly. So I think it's a mix and match approach. But again, keep in line, when we talk about risk, we're not just talking about loss prevention and fraud and theft. COVID was a massive business risk, and we saw a number of companies fail during COVID because they didn't have e-commerce, they didn't have a robust supply chain, they didn't have an HR kind of framework that meant that when they recovered, they would have staff to serve. So that was a massive learning curve for a lot of retailers who had invested heavily in all of the bad stuff that you see, but not necessarily in the infrastructure to recover, like business continuity or crisis management, for example.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I loved is the fact that you said, shifting the theft instead of eliminating it, right? All these pedestrian readers, all these physical deterrents are essentially doing that, right? They're making your store look more, guarded and the others less, and hence you're sort of shifting. And then, comes in camera vision, Corin, right? Where there is so much you can do with camera vision, right? You can not only once you've detected the theft, and that detection could happen with RFID or with those physical hard tags or in any methodology, right? So once you've detected the theft, you can easily go and marry camera vision information with it to understand who could be the potential suspects and what could you do with it, right? Solutions like that have existed in the past, but AI makes it more efficient. It makes it faster. It makes it, real time, for the lack of better words, right? You can react faster and you can really get the evidence. The quality of the data is better, right? What are you seeing around that? Are you seeing huge investments in that direction? Do you see that being a success?
I mean, definitely AI and with camera technology is to your point, it speeds up, it accounts for a lot of the validation potentially, particularly if it's integrated into things like point of sale. So for example, a high risk transaction would be a return or a refund with no customer present. That should be a red flag to many retailers within the store. So AI can analyze that. It can look into the data and say, hey, this cashier's done the same transaction 12 times. So actually, is that indicating we have a fraud risk within our employees? But again, I caution that as successful as AI is and pushing data out, you are going to need some type of action, because unless AI is going to do an intervention or an interview or something else, we're creating, again, lots of exceptions. Now, One thing I would say is if you're going to adopt technology, and again, the capex cost of some of these solutions can be reasonable, but it can also still be quite a chunky part of your capex, is look for the other value. I mean, again, when we used to talk about cameras, we would say traditionally 95% of a camera's footage is never looked at by anybody. If it's recording 24/7, you're only really looking at 5% or less. So what about the other 95% of the footage? Who could it be valuable to? Visual merchandising, store development, shopping mall management in terms of footfall or traffic flow, dwell time. Before you know it, if you are more inclusive with your strategy, you will have other stakeholders become involved. And there's always a slight stigma, which is talked about, where security, loss prevention, asset protection, call it whatever, is a necessity. It's a necessary evil, if you want to use the term. However, can you imagine, as a security professional, I no longer have to own the camera system. I don't have to apply for the budget, because why? Well, 95% of the output is of value to somebody else. So maybe those guys are the ones that are going to either partner with me or even say, listen, Corin, we'll pay for it, we'll run it, and you come as one of our stakeholders. Now, innovative thinking, maybe it takes a little bit of adoption, but I think, again, we've got to understand, we go back to that conversation with the CEO. Are you a cost center? Are you a necessary evil? Are you really a business partner that isn't just talking about single topics? If we're talking about, if I'm a security professional that has a real good understanding of retailing, I can appreciate certain processes which will impact my day-to-day business, but could actually improve retail operations, customer experience. We talk about product a lot and on-shelf availability, but what about the experience, loyalty programs, all of the things that we seek validation from our consumers after they've bought the product, because we want them to come back and we want them to buy more. So I think those are the conversations we should be having with technology. Now, yes, if it's a security tag really kind of only has one job, which is to protect the product. It can have RFID in it. It can have, digital passport data in it. So it can give a little bit more, but ultimately it might just do one thing. But I think the insights is where we can share that. But we have to really balance it with, I keep hearing about push messaging. I can send data to an associate. I can send data to a manager. Well, if we look at a store manager or a district manager's day-to-day tasks, there is very little room for receiving push messages. And actually, the other challenge, as I talked about workplace safety, is unless you have security guards or local PD who are on the door, what's the next step?
Yeah.
What's the action? Who's going to go and detain somebody? Are we going to detain somebody? I mean, non-confrontation policies are now very rife through retail. So back to the point, do we just want to know it left so that we can replenish and try to mitigate? Maybe it's a high theft line and we move it to the back of the store, or some retailers stick it behind glass cabinets if you're in grocery. As I said, there's no right or wrong answer here, and it's for the retailer to decide. But again, one action will have another action downstream. As I said, we quite often find that security, loss prevention, risk mitigation is in conflict with retailing, because we want the product to be available. We want people to be able to touch it, feel it, wear it, but not steal it.
Right. Corin, the entire industry for decades has been calling it loss prevention, right? I just feel that it limits the function so much, right? Because how long can you keep preventing loss, right? You eventually want some layer of intelligence, and if you were to rename that function now, what would you call it?
It's a great question, because again, I think you want the title for people to immediately identify what your function is. And that comes in using words like security, protection. But at the same time, you don't want to pigeonhole yourself into well, you're just security guys, or you're just loss prevention guys, or internal police. I mean, I've seen a number of ones, asset protection. Again, you quite rightly say prevention, detection. Where does it sit? Do you actually merge it into somebody else's profile, such as retail operations or sales operations? So it's a difficult one. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I think less probably for an organization about the title, more about the job description and the role. And we talk about stakeholder engagement. There are very few organizations where loss prevention has a CSO level seat at the table, a chief security officer at the table. Should we, and I've been an advocate of it in the past, if we call it retail risk, and I am the head of retail risk, well, that's quite a broad term. So it could be health and safety, it could be loss prevention, it could be business continuity. And then, yes, is it difficult to find somebody with the credentials all in one person? Invariably, yes, but not actually impossible. But what you get then is you get this resilience kind of model, which means, yes, I can deal with loss prevention. Yes, I can deal with theft. Yes, I can deal with process issues, but I can also deal with natural disasters. I can deal with how do we recover from a particular event to ensure we stay relevant and we're trading. And I think, again, I bring it back to, I'm glad we've stopped talking about COVID as much. However, COVID was that milestone where the race in COVID was to trade. If you had an e-com channel or an omni channel, you could get through. If you had a really good e-com channel, we saw some retailers actually improve and then come out the other side, building more stores, physical stores than before. But I think it was the race to open the doors, and most organizations looked inside and went health and safety, and the health and safety managers said, this isn't really health and safety. We had business continuity saying, yes, we are business continuity, but these are exceptional times. And invariably, it was those organizations that had loss prevention security teams with a very heavy retail experience that could say, listen, we need to put in frameworks, we need to put in counting systems to comply with local legislation, we need PPE. But ultimately, this is effectively an access process. And as long as we can do it safely, we can open our doors. And some retailers did very well, and others were very slow to adopt. And we should prepare for that again. I'm not suggesting there'll be another COVID event, but we should prepare for something that's as disruptive, I think.
Makes sense. Corin, your experience spans across law enforcement. You've worked with global retail brands, right? And you're now advising a lot of retailers around risk and security. What is one decision that you see them making that you feel they're going to regret in the next 5 years when they look back that was a bad call? Do you see that?
Yeah, I'd have to be careful here, otherwise I could cut out a portion of my potential business. As I said before, I think as long as all decisions are made from an informed position, then there is no right or wrong answer. I think failure to act at all is probably a decision that you might regret. I mean, again, we can look at different technologies. The early adopters of RFID, yeah, it was a challenging time for them, I'm no doubt. But those that did it well and succeeded are reaping the benefits of that downstream, particularly with new legislation such as digital passports and things. I think along the lines of those that have stuck with traditional loss prevention methods have seen themselves challenged because obviously they've added other functionality. They want a solution now to do 5 things as opposed to a singular thing. E-commerce definitely has challenged retailers. It seemed like a simple model. Customers over here, products over there, payment in the middle. What could go wrong? But actually now we see a massive risk in returns fraud. Not just credit card fraud or third-party fraud, but, simple returns fraud. And I mean, again, there's a term at the moment, which is returns abuse. Well, anyone who buys a product, in my opinion, then says they're going to send it back to you for a refund and then sends you back an empty box or sends that package somewhere where it's going to get lost. It's not abuse, it's fraud. It's fraud because they've kept the product and then you're going to pay them back their money because you can't prove that you received the product, or in fact, you can't prove they didn't send it. So I think there are elements there. Definitely, I think, as I said, a one-stop shop for solutions, those days possibly have gone now. We have retailers who have got legacy systems. And when we say legacy, we're not talking 20, 25, 30 years old. We're talking 5 years ago, they procured something and now they're looking for something else. So I think it's incumbent on solution providers to be able to work together. Open API is a term that's widely bandied around IT teams, but I think it's more than open APIs to say, well, our system can work with anything because it has an open API. No, we want to know that you two can work together to serve us, because again, retailers are in the business of retailing. They have experts in legal, HR, IT, but ultimately, a retailer isn't going to want to design and build a system. They're going to want somebody to come and say, hey, we can do it for you. We can include your WMS system for your supply chain. We can include your EBR system from your retail. Right. We can create this one-stop shop for data, maybe, in terms of data lakes, to give you the insights you want. And I think that's where that relationship, as I said, when you're selling something, ask invasive questions. Don't be ashamed. Don't assume anything. Ask somebody, do you have the capability to run this program? Because it's like buying a Ferrari. There's no point buying a Ferrari and finding out after you sold it that the person doesn't have a driving license.
And you don't have the budget to maintain it, right? So I think that's where the challenge is. You could buy as fancy solutions as you'd like and invest in, security cameras and whatnot, but how do you eventually make use of it and prove the ROI of it? And do you even have the budget to adhere to the compliance of it? Right? Are things that we see going wrong all the time, right?
Yeah. And I think, again, I'll fly the flag for those of us out in the marketplace as consultants. Is people talk about consultants often as trying to sell you back what you tell them. But actually, if you think about it, and having worked in retail organizations before, it's quite easy to be siloed into your brand. Your brand has a certain way of operating. It has a certain way of designing, presenting its product. And although there are lots and lots of networks out there, consultants work with multiple brands. So therefore they can see what works. They can see what necessarily doesn't work. They can see the challenges. So they can sometimes reduce that experience lag down quite dramatically. And that's why consultants are in that space. So again, I would say sometimes to retailers, don't be fearful of, I should know my business. I should be the expert in my field, and therefore I'm going to get through this. Speak to your solution providers. Again, I'm a great advocate that solution providers are experts. And therefore, we shouldn't just see a solution provider as someone trying to sell. We should see them as somebody saying, hey, you tell me, before I buy this, give me advocates, give me case studies, show me where it went well as wrong. Because for sure, even as good as most solutions are, there are some obviously painful stories around implementation, adoption. And those are the challenges, because again, solution could work well. The team could be super happy with it. They could feel they have enough resource, but the internal comms doesn't land. The store teams don't do what you think they should do. The warehouse teams don't follow the rules. And before you know it, that solution is sitting not redundant, but it's probably not being optimized. And that's what everybody wants. If you're going to spend money, you want to get the full value of what it is you're purchasing.
Yep.
And you want to be able to show that because it's a showcase.
Yep. Corin, I know it'll be hard for you to name retailers, but think of a retailer which is, a huge retail global chain, right? And you're aware that their theft is extremely high, or basically their loss, for the lack of better words, is, or the risk exposure is very high for organized retail crime or for internal theft, external theft, right? And hypothetically, you were to become their, chief security officer. What are the first three changes you're going to bring in? What is it that you would invest in or change internally?
I mean, there's a saying we used to use when I was in the police as a detective, and it's that first seek to understand. I mean, that's the first thing is that you really do. And very quickly, I mean, people talk about your first 100 days. You very quickly need to understand, what do I have? Where are the gaps? What am I missing? And then where is my biggest risk? What's impacting my business? And, if it's organized crime, what are the, for example, 20% of my stores or that are representing 80% of my loss. So that's the first thing. So it is really, before you actually act, is understanding then where am I going to deploy my mitigation and where am I going to apply for my budget. I think in my experience, and there are some brands that I would always sing about in terms of how well they do, because it comes in the culture and you can see it in the relationship between the function and the board. Now, without a doubt, there is clearly some risk in between there in terms of if I ask for a big budget and I don't succeed, then I'm held accountable. But then accountability is not a bad thing, actually. But what I see is those retailers that are willing to embrace new ideas, new integrations. They're not cautious to say, well, let's wait and see someone else do it and then we'll try. It's those that are willing to say, well, okay, I'll come in at the ground level. Now, clearly, I might want a discount or some kind of benefit from that, but I'm willing to do a proof of concept because if it works, this will actually change the way we operate. And that isn't always about, I can show you how much fraud I stopped or how much theft I detected. It could be, for example, gift of time. Gift of time is, again, it probably is equal to shrink. If you could save 20 minutes off an hour's operation over a real estate of 1,000 stores, how much does that represent in terms of a monetary value? Can that be invested back to create more sales? Does that then add to profitability? So I think, and then I would really kind of want to look at technologies and, yes, legacy systems. We have to embrace legacy systems. No retailer currently is going to be able to just wipe clean the slate and start again.
Yep.
So we need to be able to have that phased approach. And we work with many retailers at the moment who are absolutely doing that. I mean, the positive thing is we are seeing, although in certain markets, we know that people are saying that the budgets aren't there, but in others, we are seeing solution providers and retailers having very productive and transparent conversations to then get that investment, that board investment. As I said, there's no point going with a fixed price and a fixed demand and going to a CFO and saying, here. That conversation has to be tailored and strategically executed in a different way, because you'll get the investment for sure if you can show a compelling argument, but the argument has to be narrated in the language that individual is used to. Well, I say individual, the function is used to.
Of course.
It's always about what's in it for me. What do we get out of it? What else does it add? And as I said, there are some very, very strong, compelling factors. there, such as customer experience, NPS score. No, I've never heard a retailer come and say, "Hey, guess what? We're famous for loss prevention or asset protection." No, why would you be? You're a retailer. You should be famous for selling sneakers, t-shirts, tires, whatever it is you do.
Yeah. Yeah. Corinne, any case study that you could share where you've seen a drastic improvement, maybe by naming the retailer or not? Any retailer where you've seen a drastic improvement in the last few years because of certain solutions that they've deployed or changes in the management that they've made, or even re-architected their function to report in a certain way,
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I won't name the retailer, although I don't think they would mind. But there is a European retailer, fashion retailer, multi-brand, based out of the UK, so you can work it out then. During COVID, that they expanded their e-com as well as their physical real estate. I mean, they were present or are present pretty much across Europe. And what I applaud them for is the fact they took every element of their business, from supply chain manufacturing through to last mile to reverse logistics, such as returns. And they created almost like an enterprise platform model, which meant that it was easy to report loss. It was easy to detect loss. They could have that data sitting there, and they could work out very quickly where their biggest risks were. And they, as I said, they created a relationship with their board where, on face value, as I said, I don't work inside or with this brand, they can get investment. And they have one of the largest teams, LP teams, I've seen globally, genuinely, and it's growing, and they're specializing now. So now they have data analysts, now they have investigators, tactical interviewers, corporate. I mean, it has just grown, and I'm sure that is through confidence. I mean, that's one thing I say about a function such as security loss prevention is it's all about trust and confidence. It's about your stakeholders trusting you that you can manage whatever issue they come to you with, and the confidence of the other stakeholders like legal and HR that you're going to act ethically, morally, and you're going to execute to a high standard. That is the secret sauce, one of a better word, because otherwise, if you simply go back to saying, well, listen, I found X amount of fraud for you, I stopped these many shoplifters at ORCs, and you become, one, quite narrow in terms of what your perceived value and impact is. And we shouldn't take away, again, when we look at loss and shrink, we have financial numbers which you can present, but you've also got the cost of managing that shrinkage. So your headcount costs, your solution costs. And somebody could add it all up and say, what would happen if we did nothing for 6 months? Should we try it? And some brands have done this way back in the past, have said, let's do nothing and see what happens. Now, you don't have to be a psychic to predict what might happen. But again, it comes back to that term I used about your risk appetite. If your risk appetite is high, you will make those calls, even if they're short term. So I think, yes, I mean, definitely there are some brands out there who I think their messaging is on point. They present themselves in a different way. We used to have a term called fear, uncertainty, doubt. They call it FUD. And security was always often labeled as being guilty of this, that they would sell fear, and in turn, you would then come to us. So if I tell you bad things are going to happen, you're going to hire me because you don't want bad things to happen. I think we've evolved from that. I think we have a story to tell. And again, not everyone will agree and not everyone will buy into it. But I think those brands that succeed, and it's not necessarily even having a seat at the top table, if that's the aspiration. You can be a subject matter expert mid-table, but still be asked to the top table on occasions because of the necessity or the need or your level of experience. Because for sure, if you don't have it and you come out to look for it, from consultants and other organizations, you are going to be paying a premium because there aren't many of us out there on the outside, because most have got very well paid jobs on the inside.
Makes sense. Makes sense. This was awesome, Corin. That brings us towards the end of the episode. Do you want to share with the audience some of your background and maybe what you're working on at present, where your focus is?
Yeah, absolutely. So I represent a retail risk consultancy, bespoke consultancy, and we work with retailers in two ways. We work with them direct consulting, so sharing ideas, experiences, supporting them, project management. And on the other side, we work with solution providers as a managed service provider. So that model where brilliant solution, I love it, but I don't have the expertise to run it. I don't have the analyst or the investigators. We provide that service on a short, medium, long-term basis. So anything really from 4 weeks to 12 months is a standard engagement for us. And I'm a big believer in value, and I'm a big believer in paying back. We are very well networked. We're members of many forums. I think that's what, when I was an LP leader, that's what I appreciated. I appreciated somebody, I knew who was selling to me, of course I did, but somebody who would actually, before that, kind of, not give me a free bit of advice. But if I just wanted some advice and pick up the phone, I can do it without worrying about what the bill is going to be at the end. And I think that then adds credibility and, as I said, future engagements. So some of our projects at the moment, we're working with RFID rollouts. RFID is a loss detection solution, which is very exciting. And also on exception-based reporting and returns fraud. And that's still a big area for a lot of online retailers. So yeah, it's an exciting time. And as I said, I think we should be positive. I see a lot of negativity on this topic in LinkedIn and other places, and it's the end of the world. Retailing has been around as long as theft has. So at the end of the day, It's not going anywhere. And what we need to do is try to mitigate that risk so we can be profitable. We have to accept there is going to be lost, wastage, process error. We just need to bring it down to a level that we go, we're happy with that, or say happy with that. We can tolerate that.
Yep. Makes sense. And Corin, where can people reach out to you?
So you can reach out to us. We're Insight Retail Risk Consultancy Limited. And also in the US, we're present as Maven LP. And you can reach out to myself, Corin Dennison. I'm on LinkedIn. Or you can take a look at our website, which is www.insightretailrisk.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Corin. It was an excellent conversation.
Thanks very much for having me. Take care.